Welcome to the On the Pen podcast with your host, Dave Knapp.
Welcome to the On the Pen, the weekly dose podcast. I'm your host, Dave Knapp, man on the Manjaro. That's why I'm here. You are on the pen. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Manjaro, Zepbound, Compound, that pen. It's what we talk about each and every week here on the podcast. It's good to be here with you on this Tuesday, September 16th. If you're new here, you're just jumping in for the first time, this is On the Pen. We bring obesity medicine news from the patient perspective, which empowers you to have more competent and confident conversations with your medical providing team. Now, we typically don't do this podcast live. Every now and again we do, but there's just so much happening in the news today, and I wanted to jump on and be live with you all today to hear from you. I'm going to jump into what I believe to be the story of the day, and then we can get into a couple more things that I wanted to cover, and then I'm happy to get into anything that you may want to get into. If you're over on YouTube and you drop a super chat in there, I'll see your comment or your question, and we can potentially tackle that. But there's a lot of conversation going on Twitter. Some of our friends over at HIMS House and Bayside Health, a lot of conversations are taking place right now because a single warning letter that the FDA just dropped to Hims and Hers telehealth over primarily their Super Bowl commercial of all things could open the door for Novo Nordisk to actually bring a lawsuit against Hims under a federal advertising law. So we're going to break that down and how this could potentially happen and why the Lanham Act might become the weapon of choice for Novo Nordisk. So for listeners that are not lawyers that are listening, including myself, I am no more a lawyer than I am an endocrinologist. I'm just a guy who follows this stuff religiously because I believe that patients need to be informed when it comes to talking to their doctors and getting treatment for their chronic disease of obesity. HIMS is a telehealth company, one of the largest publicly traded telehealth companies, and they've been advertising compound semaglutide. Now, what really turned my head was about, I want to say, a month to a month and a half ago, I was listening to a radio advertisement on Sirius XM. And what I heard from this advertisement, it was a Hims and Hers. I can't remember whether they were marketing under Hims or under Hers or whatever, but it was from Hims. And the very interesting thing that struck me is that they use this phrase in their advertising that you can get compound semaglutide, the same active ingredient as Ozempic and Wegovy. Now, being on the inside of this industry, one thing that I'm very clear of from talking to different telehealth companies is that is a no-fly zone. That is not something you say if you are offering compounded semaglutide. The reason being is that Novo Nordisk actually has a specific kind of semaglutide that they have gone through, run through the clinical trials, had approved, and it is made from a yeast-based process. We always kind of joke about it. It's like their yeasty GLP-1 brew that they're able to extract the protein of semaglutide from. And that was the molecule that was tested in clinical trials. And so when we talk about the clinical trials, the safety, the effectiveness of the medication, really we're talking in terms of that kind of semaglutide. Now, the kind offered by telehealth companies, by and large, from what I've seen, is actually made from a different process. It's made from actually a chemical process which synthesizes out that chain of amino acids much differently than the process that Novo Nordisk uses to make their version of semaglutide. So when we say the same active ingredient, while the chemical structure may be the same, the way that it is manufactured and the route of how the medication is made is very much different. And so that really caught my ear when I listened to that commercial weeks ago. Now, the FDA seemed to agree that using the phrase same active ingredient as Ozempic and Wegovy and clinically proven ingredients are false and misleading. And that matters because these kind of statements don't just break the FDA's rules. They actually affect how competitors like Novo Nordisk can actually fight back in court. And that's where the Lanham Act comes in. Again, shout out to Bayside Telehealth over on Substack. The Lanham Act is actually a federal law that governs trademarks and false advertising. So under Section 43A, it allows one company to sue another company if false or misleading advertising hurts their business. Now, one of the interesting things is in the lawsuits that Eli Lilly has brought over tirzepatide against companies like Mochi, and for the name of the other one escapes me right now. But the Mochi case specifically, the judge in that case said, Lilly, you're not demonstrating that your business has been harmed. Your business has not been harmed. The same in the other health. I want to say Fella was the other one, but I'm not 100% sure on that off the top of my head. A lot of this I just go off the top of my head, and when you live in this world every day, some of this facts can get misconstrued. But I'm positive about the Mochi case, and so they've been unable to demonstrate that. Now, on the flip side, the public statements from the Eli Lilly brass in their earnings calls is that compound tirzepatide has not hurt their bottom line. It has not impacted their business, and that it's 100% a safety issue that they have for patients. Now, public statements by Novo Nordisk have been very different. They have made public statements to the ends that they believe that compound semaglutide has actually cut into their business and harmed their business. So one of the very interesting things that I see playing out here is this whole idea that the company, Novo Nordisk, would actually have to prove in a court of law that the advertising used by HIMS had hurt their business, had harmed their business. And so would they want to air out all of their dirty laundry? I don't know. But the door is open. So it's not necessarily about protecting consumers at this point. It's about protecting their bottom line and from competitors using unfair practices. So that's where the Lanham Act, and here's how this letter sort of sets this thing up. So the FDA's warning letter would effectively be evidence that Novo Nordisk could use in this case, because the FDA has already said that HIMS is making false marketing claims. And that gives Novo Nordisk sort of an open door or some ammunition that they could argue that HIMS is unfairly profiting by suggesting that its compounded version of semaglutide is equivalent to Novo Nordisk's FDA-approved version of semaglutide, Ozempic, and Wegovy. Now, on the commercial harm side, if consumers believe that HIMS products are the same, and like many telehealth companies have been clear and steered clear of this language, HIMS and hers has been pretty brazen about their marketing claims in terms of, again, same active ingredient as Ozempic and Wegovy. It essentially is the kind of competitive injury here that the Lanham Act is designed to address. If this gets used as evidence, right, this warning letter in some lawsuit citing the Lanham Act, and consumers actually believed those claims, but Novo can basically show harm to their business, that's the kind of competitive injury here that the Lanham Act would seek to address. So the FDA itself doesn't give Novo the right to sue, but once the FDA has established this, piece of evidence, this letter that they, again, made very public on their website today, Novo can actually piggyback off of that, potentially file a Lanham Act lawsuit saying HIMS is engaging in false advertising and that harms them in the marketplace. So that, to me, is the big news of the day, because Novo Nordisk has been rather unsuccessful. Somebody corrected me in the comments from earlier. I appreciate it, Debbie. Willow Health was the other one, not Fellow, as I mentioned earlier. My bad. Thank you for correcting me on that. So this all sets up to be very interesting in terms of how this could potentially affect HIMS. Their stock is down. I think last I checked, it was down like 8% today on this news. There's actually been, if you've ever heard of like Kalshi markets or some of those predicted markets, where they literally have markets set up where you can sort of invest in a certain outcome of a certain, oftentimes it's political stuff, but there's actually a market, I believe, on Kalshi market. I'm not 100% sure on which one it is. HIMS House has done a good job covering this stuff because they're very HIMS focused. But there's actually markets that actually have been tracking whether people believe or not Novo will act, but they have not been successfof so far in their a lot of their previous lawsuits. So it'll be interesting to see. Will they bring this, and how does that impact the landscape of all of the compoundings? One of the things that people I think, have a little backwards is they think that tirzepatide is the most compounded GLP-1. It is definitely not. It is still semaglutide. I believe 80 million doses last year to 30 million doses. I believe those were the numbers we got from the OFA in the lawsuits they brought against the FDA, and ultimately the FDA plus Novo plus Lilly in the separate lawsuits over the ending of the shortages. Those are the numbers we heard. That's last year, 80 million. So most of it is semaglutide. So you can see where Novo may have a larger case, like this is actually impacting our bottom line. Just a very fascinating thing to watch kind of unfold. And so will Novo Nordisk drop a lawsuit now that the FDA has dropped this letter? And I do want to go over this letter just a little bit. Let me see if I can pull this up here and we can kind of read through it and go through it ourselves here. Let me just give me one moment. Okay, that's the second page. Hold on one second. Talk amongst yourselves. This is coffee talk. We drink coffee, we talk. Big whoop. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic. HIMS semaglutide is made from a chemical process. Novo's is made from a yeast-based process. I swear I have it here. I need a producer on this podcast in a big way. Image file, and there we go. Okay. So let's put that one up. All right. Yeah. So we're going to read through this here together. You got to love technology. This is why typically we pre-record this podcast, but when we're doing it live, you're going to have to wait for me. So Mr. Dudham, Andrew Dudham, which is the CEO of HIMS, which this letter is addressed to. This letter is to advise you that the United States Food and Drug Administration reviewed your website content and at the internet address, hims.com in August of 2025, and has observed that your website offers various compounded drug products, including semaglutide. As described below, your claims concerning your compounded semaglutide products are false and misleading under Section 502A and 502BB of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Again, that's the act that gives 503B pharmacies the ability to compound in times of shortage, resulting in products being introduced or delivered for introduction into interstate commerce in violation of Section 301A of the FDCA. Under Section 502A of the FDCA, a drug is misbranded if its labeling or is false or misleading in any particular. Furthermore, under Section 502BB of the FD&C, a compounded drug is misbranded if its advertising or promotion is false or misleading in any particular. The following claims concerning your compounded semaglutide products appear on your website. Same active ingredient as Ozempic and Wegovy, clinically proven ingredients. Compounded drug products are not FDA approved, and that is something that we talk about. Sorry, I'm going to interject with a little bit of personal commentary. That's what we talk about a lot on this channel. The compounded drugs are not FDA approved. They operate completely outside of the FDA system. So making claims that go back to FDA approved ingredients are usually a no-fly zone. This came up a couple of weeks ago in another topic of conversation. I believe when Sabina from GLP Winner was over here and we were talking about the lawsuits that Lilly had brought against Willow and Mochi Health. I thought that they would maybe cite this in that lawsuit, that Novo and Lilly would use this in their lawsuit because FDA approved drugs have gone through clinical testing. So you can say, that the clinical trials show X, Y, Z. Otherwise, HIMS would have to come up with its own numbers on how patients respond to those products because they technically are not allowed to use, and you see that in this letter, to use that sort of clinical trial data to promote their medication. Your claims imply that products are the same as FDA approved product when they are not. As a result, these claims are false or misleading, and your products are therefore misbranded under the sections 502A and 502BB of the FD&C. The introduction or delivery for introduction into interstate commerce of these misbranded products is prohibited under Section 301A of the FD&C. The claims identified in this letter put you on notice of our concerns, but do not represent an exhaustive list of misbranding violations. As I mentioned earlier, I personally have heard scores of HIMS ads on SiriusXM that have used that phrase, which is, just being somebody that lives in this industry, they've always perked my ears, like when you whistle and your dog wakes up. My dog here, Ella, by my side here for the podcast today again. Maybe she'll make an appearance today. For the reasons discussed above, your compounded semaglutide products are misbranded drugs under the Section 502A and 502BB of the FD&C. Introduced or delivered for introduction into interstate commerce is violation of Section 301A of the FD&C. Please be advised the receipt in interstate commerce of misbranded drugs and the delivery of proffered delivery thereof is also a violation of Section 301C of the FD&C. We're going to switch over to the other one here. Let's see here. I lost y'all. Where'd y'all go? Hopefully this isn't too in the weeds for you all today. It's definitely something that I wanted to make sure that we covered, because this is huge news in my opinion. As previously stated, the violations cited in this letter are not intended to be all-inclusive statement of violations that may exist in connection with your products. You are responsible for investigating and determining the causes of any violations and for preventing their further recurrence or the occurrence of other violations. It is your responsibility to ensure that your operations comply with all requirements of the federal law, including FDA regulations. You should take immediate action to address any violations, including, for example, ceasing and desisting from using the language cited above that misbrands the products. Failure to adequately address any violations may result in legal action without further notice, including without limitation, seizure, and injunction. Within 15 working days of receipt of this letter, please provide a written response to the Office of Compounding Quality Compliance within the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, Office of Compliance, describing the specific steps you have taken to address any violations. Please include an explanation of each step being taken to prevent the recurrence of violations, as well as copies of related documentation. This letter notifies you of our concerns and provides you an opportunity to address them if you believe your products are not in violation of the FDCA, which of course HIMS could argue. Including your reasoning and any supporting information for your consideration. You cannot completely address this matter within 15 working days. State the reason for the delay and the time within which you will do so. If you're not located in the U.S., please note that products that appear to be misbranded may be detained or refused admission. We may advise the appropriate regulatory officials in the country from which you operate that your products referenced above appear to be misbranded drugs that cannot be legally sold to consumers in the United States. All correspondence should include a subject line that clearly identifies the submission as a response warning letter. If you have questions regarding the contents of this letter, please contact Compounding Inspections at fda.hhs.gov. Sincerely, George Tidmarsh. Very, very interesting stuff from the FDA. Now I would want to camp out on that last paragraph after we get done with this here and see if there might be a little bit more in there. So one of the topics of conversations that we have been having on this podcast over the last couple of weeks relates to a green list of API sources. API meaning active pharmaceutical ingredient. One of the things that we've called for is compound pharmacies to indicate on their websites whether or not their compound medications is coming from green list API vendors. That meaning essentially, so what is the green list? For those of you who are new to this idea and concept of the green list is actually something that the FDA came out with a couple of weeks ago, basically saying, hey, there are many suppliers of compounded medications, and the compound API sources account for like 70, it was either 72 or 78% of the total amount of enforcement actions taken by the FDA against API sources, even though compounds only account for 18% of our drugs. So essentially what they're saying there is compounding is API sourcing is a big problem, and it's like too big for us to get our head around. So in the meantime, what we're going to do is the places that we have inspected, the places that we've gone through and that we approve are going to be on a green list. So we know the FDA, we being the FDA, we know that these are good quality sources for an active pharmaceutical ingredient. In the context of what we're talking about semaglutide, tirzepatide. And so those will actually make their way into the country with less friction, right? So essentially what this means is if your API, your meaning a compound pharmacy, is coming ultimately from a source that is a non-FDA green listed source, then it is subject to seizure and detention at the border, right? As it's imported into the United States. The green list, I feel like, also establishes a way for patients to know that these drugs are coming from a legitimate source. And so when you're spending hundreds of dollars, and one of the things that I said this past week in a tweet was, I was like, compounding is not altruism. Compounders are in the business of making money just like pharmaceutical companies are. And as patients, and me as a patient advocate, we should be able to know that the good money that we're spending on those compounded medications, that they're coming from sources that are legitimately FDA greenlit, right? And so if they're coming out with a list that says, hey, we got a list, and these are the green lists. So this past week, I actually submitted a FOIA request, which is a Freedom of Information Act request to Health and Human Services. We did a video about this. That's why you need to hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell button if you're watching on YouTube, so that you get all of these ways to get our information. But essentially what we have here is a response from Health and Human Services that said, we redact the companies that are on the green list because it's considered essentially, proprietary information or industry trade secrets. But some of those companies are voluntarily choosing to have their information published on the green list. So we should get something. I've also responded to the FDA and HHS basically saying, how are patients supposed to make informed decisions if everything is redacted? What should patients be doing to ensure that their compounded medications are coming from a safe API source? Now the API, the active pharmaceutical ingredient, has been cited as a reason that other advocacy organizations like the Obesity Action Coalition, we interviewed their CEO here a few weeks ago, Joe Naglowski, they cited, the fact that they can't get to the source of the API and tell where it's coming from as a reason that they haven't been able to put their stamp of sort of approval on compounded medications. They did say that they understand why people use them, and they certainly don't hold it against people that choose to go the compounded route, but they can't put the stamp of approval behind compounded medications when there is no transparency in the source of the API, which I understand. You're sort of giving guidance to hundreds of thousands of people. You don't want to just throw that out there if you can't verify that. So if now the FDA is giving us a way to verify, hey, the API is coming from these sources and they're on our green list, then hey, why hold back? So I'll be interested in talking to Joe more about that. But we want to hear from the FDA and HHS, what are patients supposed to do? I'm going to take a pause in the action and just ask that you hit the like button, hit the thumbs up button wherever you're watching, subscribe wherever you're watching. And I also want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Ro. Ro is been long a sponsor of the On the Pen podcast. They help bring this to you each and every week. They have a program called the Ro Body Program. You may see that Serena's on Ro now. This was huge news a few weeks ago. The Ro Body Program is amazing. Essentially, patients on the Ro Body Program lose 15 to 20% of their body weight in a year when coupling these medications that we're talking about, sometimes compounded, but mostly they have access to the branded medications. They have access to the Lilly vials, the cash pay Wegovy, and Ozempic through Novo Care. And so all of this creates a seamless experience for patients who use the Ro Body Program. Couple that with lifestyle modifications and the medication where appropriately prescribed, and patients are having tremendous amount of success on the Ro Body Program. You can check them out at ro.co/OTP and let Ro in the comments of their videos online that you see their advertisements. Let them know that you appreciate them sponsoring the work that we do. Really appreciate Ro. They've been an absolutely tremendous sponsor of the On the Pen podcast. Really appreciate them. Very curious to sort of open this up to questions that anyone may have today on the topics that we've discussed or other topics that are out there. There definitely are other things to talk about in the news, but these are the two main things that I was like, we've got to get to these items today because these are definitely the big news items of the day for sure. While I'm waiting to hear from you in the comments, we'll talk about a couple of interesting bits of news from this past week. The WHO, the World Health Organization, in a bid to just be last to the party on everything that's actually good for total health for the world, right? They actually added obesity medicine in the form of GLP-1s to their list of I'm going to lose the name of it here. I think it's essential medications, right? So that just opens the door for potentially more coverage here in the United States. Typically, each independent country's different health organizations tend to follow what the WHO does to make standards of care and guidance to physicians and prescribers, et cetera. So, they're obviously late to the party. I'm not gonna opine about the World Health Organization. I've got my own personal opinions about this. And I've got my own personal opinions about the FDA, frankly. I mean, the FDA, why a lot of people in the comments on my videos are like, FDA, I don't trust anything that they say, yada, yada, yada. I mean, it's funny, the gamut of responses I get. The reason that I feel like the FDA and the green list is something to sort of hang our hats on. And then there is a couple other points I actually did want to make about that topic. The reason I do that is because, my wife has a chronic disease. She's been on an injectable medication going back all the way to 10 years old for rheumatoid arthritis. If not for the FDA providing, safe clinical trials and safety of that medication that she's taken, her body would have broken down, over the last however many years she's been alive. Love you, honey. My chronic disease of type 2 diabetes and obesity has been treated well with an injectable medication now for 3 years. It's extended my life. It's improved the quality of my life. The medicines my wife has taken have improved the quality of her life. That has all been, facilitated by a system in which the government, organization of the FDA has presided. And so I find the track record of safe medications to be a helpful thing for patients. And I think the one thing that these organizations do well is they inspect for sterility. They inspect for violations. And so really it's less about drug approvals. And to me, it's more about the safety of the manner in which your drug is produced and the supply chain that handles the drug from the time that it is manufactured to the time that you are injecting it into your body. So just I felt like that was a little bit of color to add, because even doctors are like, well, they're not FDA approved, so that should be your primary concern, is that they've never been tested for potency. Here at the end of the day, we've never had a larger study on untested medications than we have for patients who are using compounded GLP-1s. There are millions and millions of patients on compounded GLP-1s. Within the On the Pen community, there's over 170,000 of you across the different platforms, and a good number of those people are on compounded medications. They work. And last I checked, nobody's growing a second head. But we do, as patients, I believe, need to have some transparency in the process by which these things are manufactured and made. And like I said earlier, compounding is not this altruistic thing that's just out to, improve your health. It is a business. It is primarily in the business to make money. And when there's money involved and consumers involved, consumers should have certain protections. And those protections, I believe, should include, when it comes to compounded GLP-1s, where they're coming from. And is that coming from a safe source? Now, I do want to say, in response to some of my social posts about this over the last couple of days, I've heard really positive things from Strive Pharmacy, who said that they may be willing to put up that they are green list approved on their website. I saw from Shed RX that they're drafting a landing page right now for their website so that patients can know that their medications are sourced from green listed sources. I think that these are all really, really important things for patients to know when they're injecting something into their body. Will it be safe for me to inject? Is the medication sterile? Is the medication what I have been told to believe that it is? And I think that that's incredibly important, especially when you're considering an injectable medication. I'm going to go to some of the questions now. I do know that many people are on compounded medications because they can't afford or don't have access to the branded medication. But I am curious, for those of you who haven't checked in a while on the branded medications, if you've heard about our sponsors, Claimable, because Claimable, who is another sponsor of the On the Pen podcast, is actually a company that provides a service that allows you to fight back against your insurance company denials. Now, insurance companies rely on 90% of the patients that get denials never fighting them. And they don't fight them because the process, quite frankly, is cumbersome and convoluted. So what Claimable does is they provide a platform that allows you to compile all of your case, and they help you build that medical case, that legal case, and then they help to create that case and send it off to all the interested parties, which is more than just your insurance company. Your insurance company is ultimately the final arbiter of this in most cases. But at the end of the day, your legislature should know about this, because, you know, what matters when we talk about access to compounded medications, and we'll get into a little bit about what the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding is up to in terms of some legislation that just got proposed yesterday. But the important thing to consider here, I kind of lost my train of thought, to consider here when it comes to the access of these medications, that is that 90% of these are never fought. And so Claimable comes in and helps you build that case, sends it off to your legislator in addition to your insurance company, so that your legislators, hearing the stories about this. Because before a trade organization like the OAC or myself or the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding goes and darkens the door of people in Washington, D.C., they should have heard from you that, hey, this is the problem on the ground. This is the issue that I'm having, and I can't get access to medication that treats my disease, and here's why. They need to hear from you, the constituents. And so they also do that. They also send it off to your employer, because when it comes to battling these insurance companies for coverage, a lot of people don't understand what a critical role your employer can play in that. They can step in and they can encourage and they can help make things happen too. So Claimable does all of that for a very nominal fee. You can check them out at getclaimable.com/OTP. Use code OTP10. It'll save you 10% off of the cost of that. But it's a very marginal cost, like $40, when you consider, you know, how much it would save you if you do get those appeals overturned. And we learned last week that they have about an 80% track record in, you know, the larger conversation about medications being appealed, about an 80% track record. With GLPs and fighting these, it's over 50%. So that's still a pretty good number. You got a 50% shot at getting it covered. I'd say that's worth the $40 to see if you are one of the 50% that ultimately does get your medication covered. So Claimable is just doing yeoman's work. Many from the OTP community have been able to get back on that branded medication. I think at the end of the day, most of us would choose to be on the branded medication if we could be on the branded medication. And then all this conversation about compounding really becomes sort of a secondary conversation, because we've expanded accessibility. The insurance companies are on board, et cetera, et cetera. But these are the things and the tools that we like to bring you to help you fight that battle against the insurance company, and hopefully be one of the 50% who actually does win those appeals. Looking for any questions here. I want to also bring up that last topic, the news yesterday on a House resolution that will actually sort of amend the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. The FD&C, again, we talked about that earlier in the HIMS news. It actually is what gives compounders the ability to compound medications in times of shortage, and then it sort of lays out the 503A stipulations, et cetera, et cetera. This is actually going to codify some things and clear some things up within that. Now, we've been advocating for the last year for some change to happen here and for some clarity for patients in terms of how the FD&C is interpreted, and we have had a petition up at Policies for the People, which is run by a PAC that is aligned with the current HHS Secretary Kennedy. This actually mirrors a lot of what we've been advocating for over a year. So just to get into this a little bit, House Resolution 5316 was introduced by two Republican representatives, Diana Harshbarger of Tennessee, and Buddy Carter of Georgia. They're actually the only two pharmacists in Congress. And the APC has been working with them, as well as the American Pharmacists Association and the National Community Pharmacists Association. They're advocating for the backing of this measure, which would do a few things. First of all, it would authorize 503A pharmacies to compound drugs for urgent use in hospitals or clinics with certification and record keeping, plus a 60-day transition window that allows them, when the drug comes off the shortage, to sort of off ramp. Now, we got those off ramps, but they were provided by a court of law. They weren't provided within the FD&C. So like codifying that will be helpful for these compound pharmacies to run their business. Now, just imagine you're a business and the government established your business under an act of Congress, in this case, the FD&C, and they established it and they said, we want you to serve as a pharmaceutical backstop to our supply of drugs in this country when they run low. But then conversely, you just need them when there's emergency, and then they just have to turn it off. Like they need an on-ramp, they need an off-ramp to plan their business. Any business needs to know how that is going to impact their business, when, timelines, all that stuff. So it sort of codifies some of that. Now, improved shortage reporting. This is something that we advocated for very clearly in our early petition. That requires manufacturers to report anticipated disruptions and surges in demand, and directs the FDA to consider data from hospitals, clinicians, and patients when updating their shortage list. Now, this was something that was sorely lacking in and highlighted in those lawsuits that the Outsourcing Facilities Association brought against the FDA, is that the only thing they did was take Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk's word. Now, that's a massive conflict of interest. When patients are over here saying, I can't find my medicine, and doctors are over here saying, our patients can't find their medicines, and hospitals are saying, our pharmacies can't get them, then that's not tracking with the data provided by the pharmaceutical companies. So clarifying that, I think, is incredibly important. And that's something that we put into our petition last year. A stronger role for 503Bs. Again, these are the outsourcing facilities, the drug factories that stand to mass produce these drugs. It mandates annual updates to the FDA's bulk substance list and provides a 180-day transition period when shortages end. So it codifies, again, that 180-day transition period for them to get an off-ramp to go through their supplies so that they're not wasting a bunch of API to fulfill patients' needs. And also, I think there's a patient element to this where patients are provided a nice window to have an off-ramp. And then some regulatory cleanup, which removes some obsolete language from the FD&C that no longer applies and ensures compounded medications are clearly labeled, which I think is important for patients as well. Scott Bruner provided he's the president of the CEO of the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding, provided a quote to On the Pen. He said, this legislation is actually common sense reform. It ensures that when shortages happen, they will, patients can count on compounding pharmacies and outsourcing facilities to be there with rapid solutions. So this act of legislation, people are like, well, the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act already gave compound pharmacies the ability to compound in times of shortage. So what does this change? Well, that's what we just laid out for you. That's what's different about these changes to the FD&C. Now, I don't think it went far enough. I think pharmaceutical companies should not only have to report anticipated shortages, but they should have to show that they have capacity to meet that demand too. And again, Lilly would argue, Novo would argue that they had to do that with the FDA, but it needs to be codified. Unless it's law and has some enforcement behind it, it means nothing, because then we're just relying on the good faith of the FDA and the pharmaceutical companies. And we know, if we know anything, we know there's a long history of inbreeding between big pharmaceutical companies and the FDA in this country. And how do you know that somebody who's with the FDA today isn't maybe eyeballing a position with the company that they're working with today, a potential position with that company in the future, to where they might just, accept information for what it is. I don't know. There just needs to be so much more transparency in this, because at the end of the day, this isn't like a oorah compounding, and it's not like a oorah pharma. At the end of the day, it's about patients. It's about you and me who have struggled through the last couple of years of these insane shortages, and am I going to get my medication, and am I not? And quite frankly, a problem that has pushed many, many people to the far reaches of the internet for gray market solutions to these ultimately systemic problems that we have in this country. We have to address this. This is a step in the right direction. Does it go as far as I want it to? Probably not. But I think it does create a level of transparency and codify some things that were, sorely lacking in this last shortage. And shortages will happen again. This is not, the first time that there's been drug shortages, and it won't be the last time. And at the end of the day, patients deserve access to their medication, and they deserve to do that without also needing a prescription for Xanax just to live through it. I mean, for crying out loud, it's been quite a roller coaster for patients. That's what I got for you today. I do want to just do a quick update on my own personal experience. I'm going to do a personal update on this in the next couple of weeks, but I'm to my lowest weight that I've been ever on a GLP-1. I'm working out. I'm feeling great. I owe that all to quitting alcohol and staying engaged in my health. So what is one of the secrets to what I've done? Well, one of the secrets is that I actually discovered a new product back in April called Shape-a. It is the numberless scale. Now, if you have lived with shame, guilt, and despair over the scale, if you've sort of stepped on a scale and it has the power to make or break your day, your week, your month, then the Shape-a scale is something you definitely need to check out. Because what I find is when the scale breaks my heart, I don't step on it again for a while. And when I'm not stepping on the scale, I'm not engaged every day at the same level with the decisions that I'm making to move, to eat foods that nourish my body. When I am stepping on the scale every day, I'm engaged. And that's the gift that Shape has been to me. I've been able to step on it. And instead of measuring numbers, it measures a color zone. It zooms out. Instead of looking at day-to-day fluctuations, it looks at a pattern. Your number that on a scale every day is just a simple data point. A pattern is how you're doing. And so I just try to stay in that green maintain zone or that blue lose zone all the time. If I sneak into the gray, which means I'm gaining, then I got to take a serious look at what's happening. And it helps me to course correct. Within a matter of days, I'm back into that green and ultimately back into that blue. I'll do a personal update coming up soon. I do believe that I may have actually reversed my type 2 diabetes by removing alcohol from my diet altogether. It's just been an amazing journey getting back to the best version of me. I have more energy, more vitality. Can you see it in my face? Like, I know that this the lights in here can be kind of funky sometimes, but I guess a glare. I don't know. The lighting's funny, but I've gotten so many comments over the last couple of days and weeks on just how I'm appearing, which, I don't always love those comments. But I've heard from many of you there. That's, I feel like a little bit better. I just feel healthier. I feel better, which ultimately is better for On the Pen. And I'm just very thrilled. And so, I want to thank you all for your kind words and your encouragement, and thank you for being here. And thank you for being the best part of what we do at On the Pen. If you want to check out the Shape-a scale, you can go to myshapea.com/OTP. And if you use code OTP30, they're giving those who follow our channel a 30% discount on the Shape-a scale. It is an amazing product. Only products that I bring you here are ones that I use and I believe in. And I definitely believe in the Shape-a scale, Claimable, and Row. And I thank them for bringing this podcast each and every week, allowing me to do what I do. I love it and I love you. And I'm so grateful to be doing this each and every week with you. It is a dream come true. And you all are certainly part of that dream. And thank you for being here. We will catch you on the next one, my friends. We've got a great On the Pen live coming up this Thursday night. If you missed Robin Pashby, her viral talk on obesity, now I think over 7,000 of you have seen that video on my channel alone. I know our friends over at The Downsize put it up. I know that Robin also had, Dr. Pashby has it on her channel as well. If you missed that, don't miss out. This week, this Thursday night, we just recorded last night. We've got Dr. Pashby. I interviewed her. It was a amazing conversation. So if you thought her presentation was amazing, you are going to love our conversation that we had last night. I hope you'll check that out Thursday night and every Thursday night, 7 p.m. Central, On the Pen live here on YouTube. Catch it. Don't miss it. Don't miss out. Love all of you. Have a great day, and we will catch you all on the next one. Thank you, my